Do you ever think about the legacy that you're going to leave behind? Not just things like inside jokes and family traditions, but the real impact that you're going to have on the future. I think recently a lot of us were thinking about the future because we hit this momentous day in history, okay? October 21st, 2015, and the day that Marty McFly goes back to the future. The internet just exploded with this, and everyone was really excited because it's the day that we finally get to start dressing like this. Yeah. Just like the 80s, except way more 80s. Yeah, so 30 years later, 1985 to 2015, how'd we do? Well, let's review. Do we have any of these guys? Flying cars. Because I was pretty excited about that. My neighbor actually has a DeLorean. It's under a cover, and I'm always like, oh, that's so cool. No, we don't have those. We have these. Dude, I could never drive that. If I drove that, I would always feel like I was running late to preschool. It's like, I just can't do that. Oh, man. Hoverboards, okay? I'm a big board sports guy. I'm a big surfer. I really enjoy that stuff. So I was really looking forward to the hoverboards. The kind of closest thing we've got is the Segway. Hey, McFly, Segways don't work on water. Yeah, no joke, Biff. They weigh like 250 pounds. I can't even get them out of the trunk of my car. And I don't know what it is with stock photography. Those guys make me wish we did dress more 80s. I don't know what that's about. Okay, rehydrated pizza. I like pizza. Yeah, so the idea of that is good. I mean, the closest we've got, though, bagel bites, really? I mean, you cook a bagel bite, it doesn't even come out the size of a real bagel. It's like, what? It's basically a pizza cookie, which sounds awesome because I like pizza, I like cookies, but the reality is, like, they come out in two temperatures, like icy cold or molten lava hot. And it's like, you let them cool off, and it's like this crunchy racer crouton thing. It's just no good. All right, self-lacing high tops, okay? The epitome of fashion and style. No, we have these. Okay, well, what they are, in fact, less stylish, I'll give you that, but they are more functional. You see those holes around the outside? That's so that your dignity can leak out if you wear them. If you're wearing some, just tuck them under your seat right now. Okay, we'll pray for you. You can put that on a card. All right, so fashion and industry aren't maybe living up to the dreams of the future that we had in 1985, but that movie did get something right. And that's the way that we live, the choices that we make, the actions that we take or that we don't take, absolutely have an impact on the future. And that's what this series, Legacy, is all about. The lives that we live are going to leave a mark. And are we being intentional with the way that we live? See, a legacy it's what's handed down to the next generation. And it's more than just an heirloom or a physical inheritance. It's how we're going to be remembered. What are we going to be known for? What's our reputation like? The reputation, is it the kind that the next generation is going to aspire to try to live up to, or the kind they're going to try to be way different than? We are hardwired to want to live lives of significance, to make a difference, to be somebody, to do something. We instinctively want our lives to matter. We want to be remembered as like loving fathers and mothers, as good friends and good parents. That's really important to us. But here's the truth, though. We're not remembered by our beliefs or our sentiments. We're remembered for what we actually did. And so whatever we've got, our ideals up here have to come out in our actual life. Otherwise, it won't really make any difference. So the way that we live is what sets the tone for the legacy that we're going to leave. And this is something that God really cares about, the way that we live. In fact, we see this kind of, as the Bible records history, we see this pattern begin to emerge, where God sends prophets like Abraham, Moses, Jeremiah, to the people, to the Israelites, to tell them how he wants them to live. And then we see that they do it. They respond. They begin to live the way God wants them to live. And God's happy and they're happy. Then over time, there begins to be this sort of drift. And I've experienced that in my own life. Maybe you can relate to me, or maybe I'm just the worst sinner in here. I don't know. But where you had your things were going right, and then you've just drifted over time. And for the Israelites, what that looked like was they weren't supposed to have these interfaith marriages, but they started, the neighbor girl was kind of hot, and whatever. So they got married, and then they brought in these other religions. And so they started to kind of mix the two and started taking on these pagan rituals and practices and stuff like this. So God had to, intervene by sending more prophets. Okay, he sent Hosea. If you want to look him up this week in the Bible, it's the Hebrew spelling with an H, not the Spanish spelling with a J, okay, Hosea. He sent Jonah. He sent Micah, okay? Now, they were supposed to speak words of warning and judgment to God's people. And I would think, man, if I was drifting, words of warning and judgment would make me pretty defensive. I don't think I would like that. But that's not the kind of response that they got. And they were not PC either. Like, Micah told God's people that they were being like a stubborn heifer. That's like a female cow. I don't know. I'm not around cows, but I assume that's a pretty insulting thing to say to somebody. It certainly would be today. He said that God would ruin them for their sins, and he said that they would be the laughing stock of the nations. And this was a very patriotic people. So these were kind of insulting words, but the Israelites didn't get offended. They didn't, throw rotten food at Micah or run him out of town. Their response was very like, Micah, what do we do to please the Lord? How can we regain God's favor? Because this is a prophet of the Lord. They took him very seriously. And they asked, should we bow down before God? Should we bring more burnt offerings? Would the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams or 10,000 rivers of oil? In other words, should we go to church more? Should we serve more? Should we pray more? Micah, do we need to write bigger checks or join extra growth groups? Or, what is it that we need to do? And Micah answered with this very powerful statement that's going to be the theme verse for this series, this week and the next 2 weeks, okay? It's Micah 6:8. So if you'd pull out that outline or get out that Eastlake app on your phone so that we're all looking at it together, it's going to be the first verse in there. Micah 6:8 says, "What does the Lord require of you?" Micah answers, "Act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God." Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So underline act justly. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So this 3-part series, we're going to be covering these 3 action statements. They're all very action-oriented. They all have a verb attached to them. We're going to be unpacking this very simple and powerful statement that when you ask God, what is it you want from me? He says, these are the things that I want you to do. So these are not just ways of believing. These are ways of living. We said that before. If you want to leave a legacy, it's not what you believe, it's what you actually do. And so for today, we're going to be talking about acting justly, actually doing it, not just caring about it or splashing water on ourselves on Facebook or whatever. We're going to really do it. Make no mistake about it. True, authentic Christianity is not about just believing. Jesus expected his followers to believe, but he expected much more from them than that. He expects his followers to live like him and to be like his hands in the world doing the work of the kingdom of God right here on earth. So, to act justly, or as other translations put it, to do justice. So that's the 2 kind of ways that we translate it today. The reason that there's some mixed translations is because this is an idea that in the Hebrew made a little bit more sense than it does in English today. So the original word, we don't do this a lot, we're going to go all the way back to the Greek, okay, was mishpat, the Hebrew term mishpat, and it puts the emphasis on the action of justice. Now, I hear action of justice, and what I think of is the punitive side of justice. Like, I think Batman. Awesome. I like Batman, right? Like, finding the evildoers, forcibly balancing the scales of justice by punching people in the face. Like, this is good. Catch the bad guys, make them pay. That's part of justice. That's a part of it, and that's why we translate the word as justice. But in the Hebrew, the mishpat also had this restorative side of justice. So you got that you balance the scales by punishing the bad guys, but you also balance the scales by raising up the hurting and the oppressed, by restoring the dignity and the value to those that didn't have it. And so mishpat is this bigger idea where you honor the intrinsic value of every human being as a loved and valued child of God in need. And so everyone gets what they deserve. The bad guys get, knocked down, and the oppressed, the poor, the hungry, the needy, they get raised up. So to understand biblical justice and God's design, I brought a little example up here today, which I'm going to get to in a second. So think for a second about something that, we'll look at this. Okay, so this is a blanket. This is actually a swaddling blanket. So if you're a parent of an infant, you wrap them up like a little baby burrito, and you don't pop them in the microwave. But they magically just go to sleep. They don't wake up throughout the night. This is amazing, right? So yeah, that's how that works. So that's what this is for. Now, but basically it's just a square of fabric, right? So on first glance, it's a pretty simple blanket. It's not. But then if you look a little bit closer, and you can't see this, but I can see this, there's a pattern to it. There's a crosshatch, and they've got this little weavy, patterny bit. But if you were to look even closer at this blanket, you'd see that it's not really just that. It's actually thousands and thousands of threads that are woven together, not in a random hodgepodge way, but in a very distinct pattern. Up, down, up, down, up, down, over, across, under and through, around and around and around. And then if you were to look even closer, each thread is really a number of different threads that are spun together to be a thickness of a thread. And if you were to look even closer, each one of those fibers is really a number of different fibers. If you've got microscopic, this thing is incredibly complex, but it works together to create this magical function of making babies go to sleep and never waking up or bothering you. Yeah. So that's how that works, okay? Not that they're to bother you. They want your love and affection, okay? So our world is like that. You've got at first glance, there's, the earth, but then you look at it and it's like, wow, it's a little more complicated than that, isn't it? I mean, you've got a solar system where the sun is a certain size and it's a certain temperature and it's just big enough to keep the earth close enough that we don't all freeze to death and just not too close because we don't want to all like catch on fire, right? And the earth is spinning just enough to keep us like kind of a toasty marshmallow warm, not enough to fly us off into space, right? So there's a lot of that. And you look at even the human body and it's very, amazing, and then it gets more and more complicated. There's all these complicated systems. You've got the respiratory system, you've got your digestive system, you've got your circulatory system, and they're all working together for the purpose of us living. And I think for a lot of us, certainly believers, we look at that and we go, wow, there's a lot of intentional design for all of those things to work together. And that's true. Psalm 102 says that God laid the foundations of the world. And in Psalms, it also says that God knit us together in our mother's womb. So like he's intricately involved in the design of that. And why? Because it has a function. And so Timothy Keller, who's one of the authors on the back of your outline, one of the books that we recommended called Generous Justice, talks about this idea of God's design in the world like a fabric. Like I mentioned before, like everything's working together, that there's a pattern to it and a design to it. But what happens is that our world isn't just God's justice. Our world looks a little bit more like this. There's these injustices that have ripped apart the fabric of God's design, right? You've got maybe war over here, and famine. You have orphans, maybe the sex trade. Over here you've got like skinny jeans. This ripped the fabric of God's design. Okay? So this is not something I want to wrap my baby in. Like I don't think it's going to work very good. They're going to get one arm out and then they're going to cause Hades. I'm going to be awake all night. That's how that's going to work. God's world is like that. He designed it to work together for us to love each other and love Him and be in perfect harmony with one another. But sin messed all that up, and now there's these injustices. Now, what we're to do as followers of God is to do justice. And what does that mean? That means that we're taking these tattered threads and we're respinning the ends, right? And then we're weaving them back in. So we're taking the people, maybe those orphans, and we're giving them homes. We're taking those refugees and we're making sure that like we receive them with loving care, help them find what they need. We're doing all of these active justice things that are reweaving and repatching the fabric of the earth. Of course, we're not going to get it all perfect. God's going to come back and restore that one day, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, here's the thing. We've got to understand that, God's intent was to have it whole and working together, and we're to be about putting it back together as we can. But this is why it's so important to understand that salvation's not just about my belief and my security, my eternal salvation, me. Because God's way more about us being involved in the restorative work of His kingdom. And that means that it can't be just about me. It means to be about not just belief, but action, actually working with other people to set and redeem and set the world right again. At the end of Revelation, the end of this book, the last chapter, it's a dream. And it's an interpreted dream. It's not meant to be a literal, like, here's exactly how it's going to go. But what you don't see is God whisking away all of the believers and then just leaving everybody else on this, like, hell on earth kind of, the earth is now the Thunderdome and it's Mad Max and all. Like, that's not what you see. What you see is God bringing heaven to earth to restore all things. There's no death, there's no sickness, there's no hurting, there's no more pain. He restores all things. It's a new heaven, a new earth, and a new day. And so God cares very much about this fabric because He created it for this purpose, and He's going to bring it all back together. And we're to be His hands and feet and doing that in the world today. So until Jesus comes back and restores all things, we're to be, His hands, His feet, restoring, doing that mishpat justice, raising up the oppressed, and at the same time punishing those, holding people accountable for their misdeeds. Now, this idea of justice in the Bible is a mega theme. Like you see it over and over and over again as you read this book, as this collection of books. So I want you to write this first fill in because it's so close to the nature of God and who He is. So write this down. Biblical justice reflects the very character of God. Justice, mishpat, reflects the character of God. You don't even have to be a believer to resonate with the idea of justice. In fact, I think it's one of the really cool things about this generation, the kind of young group that's coming out of college right now, is that they naturally care about social issues. It's just something that, like, they hear about wrongs and injustices, and they want to do something about it. They want to draw awareness to it, or they want to do whatever. So think back a few years ago with the rise of Tom's shoes. Okay, Tom's shoes became popular not because we wanted a simpler shoe style. Like people were like, dude, I wish my shoe looked more like a bag on my foot. Like that. That happened, but that's not why they were popular. They were popular because it was a buy one, give one. So if you bought a pair of shoes from Tom's Shoes, they would give a pair of Tom's shoes to somebody around the world in Ethiopia or wherever that didn't have shoes and that desperately needed footwear. And everyone could get with that idea. These were not Christian shoes. Sure, lots of Christians bought these shoes, but lots of people bought these shoes. I mean, they were everywhere. And so that's something that everyone can get on board with. And I think this is, for sure, this church is a safe place for anybody who's just checking out the whole God thing, who's just kicking the tires of Christianity, want to find out what they believe, and you're not sure about it yet. This is always a safe place for you, and I think you're gonna get along with this series because there's something, I think, again, in the design of us that likes the idea of wrongs being righted. And so this series is a series about that, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. But if you are a believer and God lives in you, it's super critical that we get this right. The more that you follow God, the more your life is going to reflect the character and the values that He cares about. And God cares about the vulnerable in this world. And we should be concerned about and want to show compassion toward and justice toward others. That should be a priority for us. Over and over again in this book, you see this theme. You see that God takes up the care and the cause of the widow, the orphan, the immigrants, and the poor. It's over and over again. Orphans, widows, aliens might have been how it was translated when you were a kid, all like the immigrants and the poor. In ancient societies, these groups were so marginalized. They didn't have people on Facebook trying to draw attention to what was going on with them. Their best hope was for survival, okay? So the idea that, this powerful God would take up the cause for them was totally countercultural. It's really hard for us to contextualize today how absolutely radical that idea was. Today, we might include people like the refugees, the homeless, even those addicted to drugs and alcohol. I mean, talk about having your life just uprooted. Many single moms and dads. Now, caring for the vulnerable is so close to the heart of God. I mean, it's in the descriptions of Him. Look at these verses. They're not in your outline. I think the references are, but I'm going to put them up on the screen so you can follow along. Psalm 146 says, "Who works justice for those who are pressed down by the world, providing food for those who are hungry? The Eternal frees those who are imprisoned. He makes the blind see. He lifts up those whose backs are bent in labor. He cherishes those who do what is right. The Eternal looks after those who journey in a land not their own. He takes care of the orphan and the widow, but He frustrates the wicked along their way." We see it again in Deuteronomy. He is the great God, the mighty and awesome God, who shows no partiality and cannot be bribed. He ensures that orphans and widows receive justice. He shows love to the foreigners living among you, and He gives them food and clothing. Psalm 68, 4-5. "His name is the Lord. Rejoice in His presence. Father to the fatherless, defender of widows. This is God whose dwelling is holy." And so again, this is the very description of God, is this God of justice who cares for these groups of people. Over and over again, God identifies with and instructs His followers to support and help the powerless and the marginalized. And it's really, again, hard for us to contextualize how radical this was. Sri Lankan scholar Vinath Ramachandra says that this is scandalous justice. Listen to this quote from him. "In virtually all of the ancient cultures of the world, the power of the gods was channeled through and identified with the elites of society, the kings, priests, and military captains, not the outcasts. To oppose the leaders of society, then, was to oppose the gods. But here, in Israel's rival vision, it is not high-ranking males, but the orphan, the widow, the stranger, with whom Yahweh, that's God, takes His stand. His power is exercised in history for their empowerment." So from the ancientest of times, God stood with and stood for, and again, He really stood for these groups of people and stood against the gods of every other culture and nation, because He was a God on the side of the powerless, wanting justice, mishpat, to restore those who were in need of it. So justice for the vulnerable is so close to the heart of God, and it's a priority for Him. It needs to be a priority for us. And that leads us to number two. Number two, to do justice, we must be disturbed by injustice. To do justice, we must be disturbed by injustice. We've got to see it. We've got to notice it, be aware of it, not become hardened to it. Here's what the Bible teaches about justice, okay? Another verse in your outline. 1 John 3 says, "If anyone has material possessions," and guys, we're in North America, that's us, okay? "And sees someone in need but has no pity on them," in other words, they do nothing about it, "how can the love of God be in that person? Let's not love with words or speech, but with action and in truth." Again, not remembered by the way that we believe, but by the things that we do. Let's do it. James 2:15 through 17 says, suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So if you see faith by itself isn't enough, unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. And once Jesus was teaching about the end times, okay, the time when all of the world would stand before God in judgment, like you get into heaven or you don't. And he says that there's going to be two groups with a wide expanse between them. And the big expanse is on this issue of how they handled this issue of justice or injustice. I'm going to just kind of paraphrase it. You can read it this week. Matthew 25. If you don't have a Bible, you can pick one up in the lobby. Or you know what? If you have access to Google, just type in Matthew 25, and then a Bible will magically appear. We do live in the future. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. That wasn't in... Marty McFly didn't do that, but it's here. All right. So, he says to the people on the right, come into my kingdom. It's been prepared for you. These people make it. Well, why did God let them in? Because I was hungry. You gave me something to eat. I was sick. You provided medicine. I was thirsty. You gave me clean water. I was homeless. You gave me shelter. I was illiterate. You taught me to read, unemployed, and you gave me training. Well done, you did what I wanted you to do. Not you believed what you can pass the entrance exam. No, you did what I wanted you to do. Come on in. Then it says he'll turn to those on his left, right, the other group, and say, depart from me, you who are cursed to eternal destruction. Wow. What did they do? Well, I was hungry, you pretended not to see. I was illiterate. You didn't give a dime for curriculum. Without work, and all you cared about was your own career. I was without shelter. You built a 2,000 square foot home with a guest room that sat empty for yourself. People on the left, they're cursed and rejected, but they're also surprised. It says that they ask a question. Well, wait, when did we see you hungry and hurting and destitute? And he says, whatever you did for the least of these, you did it for me. But whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. Now, these are really troubling words. Because again, he didn't accuse them of wrongdoing. He didn't say, well, you guys are rapists and murderers. You didn't really think you were getting in, did you? No, it's just inaction. And that's scary. And then it also sounds like, well, wait a minute. So is it faith? Or is it works? Is it what we do that gets us into heaven? And we say, well, no. I mean, we know Ephesians 2:8 says, for by faith we've been saved, not by works. So our faith is what saves us. But then you have to look at the rest of that verse, that we are God's workmanship, created for good works, and therefore we're going to do them. So yes, if you have faith, you're saved, but if your faith is real, it's going to transform the way that you live. And if it hasn't transformed the way that you live, I think you really owe it to yourself to ask some really honest questions about the legitimacy of your faith or the relationship that you have, because it's not starting to look like the Lord, and it needs to. So that's a disturbing thing, again, that they weren't accused of anything. It was just inaction. And so we want to make sure that we sort this out. Friends, as your pastor and someone who has devoted my life to helping people find and follow Jesus, because I really care about this issue. We just can't live in this country and be like, well, I guess we just won the genetic lottery, and it's not that big a deal. I'm going to just tip the Salvation Army once in a while. I mean, that's not what God's calling us to do. We've got to do something about it. So this is why Christy and I, my wife, and I know many of us in this room, we've made sacrifices to make this a part of our lifestyle. And again, this is not like all stuff that we just one day did because we prayed a magic prayer and that was it. This is over the time of us being believers, most of our lives, our hearts and our lives have begun to reflect the character of God. And so I think that some of the things that we do are characterized and really motivated by what God's called us to do. So for us personally, we really feel like the cause of the orphan is the one that just that's the biggest rip in this fabric that just really gets what I don't know. So for us, that's what we do. So we have 3 orphans that we support through Compassion International. We started this in college. We have Mutiaba, he's 12 in Uganda, Sofian, 10 in India, and Kernia, she's 8 in Bolivia. And so we've sacrificed, it's $1 a day, that's $3 a day. So that's the cost of the cable bill that we don't have, okay? And we support those orphans. And then we do that because we have 3 biological children. We want to have kind of an orphan for each of them. 2 years ago, we added one in Uganda through the Hope Child, or a Bright Hope School in Uganda that's through the church. So we have one that we support there. Beyond that, we have 2 of them that live with us full time. We have 3 biological kids, but we're also foster parents for the county of San Diego. And so we have, for more than a year now, we've had 2 foster children awaiting adoption and all of that. And so this is 24/7. This is the life that we live. And why do we do that? Is it because we're pastors or some sort of super Christians? No, it's just because we're believers. And most of that stuff started long before, and even the dream of that, long before I'd been called into ministry. When we were just in college, we said, this is something we really want to do as a family. And again, the more we've followed Jesus, the more he's strengthened that desire in our heart, because he put it there in the first place. So, and again, that's us, and that's our specific call. I don't think that that's for everybody. In fact, I know it's not. But we all are all called to do something. And so we've got to figure out what that is. And I know that this is something, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, we do it and you don't, because our church does this really well. I mean, we celebrate every other month, I feel like. We're celebrating a team of people that went to Baja to build a home for someone that didn't have one, okay? We send people all over the world to do stuff all of the time. We do shoe drives, we do backpack drives, we send those down to TJ. We have a campus down there that helps, navigate, because they're in their own kind of like Uganda over there. We're partnering with them. We support this would not exist without Eastlake Church and the generous giving of those here who serve there as well. The safe house for the girls get rescued from sex trafficking situations that are underage, and the police used to not have anything to do with them. It's like, well, we could take them to jail, but they're really victims here, or we could, drop them off at Polinsky, but they really need care. And so now they come to a safe house where they get Christian loving care, and they get back on their feet, they get training and all of that stuff. So this is something that we do really well. There's a lot of families in our church who do foster care as well. And now this one's not in your outline, but I encourage you to write this down. Luke 3:11. Just write down that reference so you can look it up this week. This is a verse that is just so simple. The man with 2 coats should share with him who has none. Doesn't that just make sense? I feel like it does. I feel like anybody can get behind that. And it's what we're calling everyone to do with the Christmas conspiracy, is direct some of our resources, not all of them. The goal is not to become poor and needy and homeless ourselves. That doesn't help anybody. But direct some of our resources, because we definitely do have some. We have 2 coats to help those who have none. God's one day going to hold me accountable as a believer, like he did in that story. He's going to hold you accountable, but he's also going to hold me accountable to how I led you as the church. And there's a lot of scary verses for pastors about how we lead people. So this is really important. But we want to be known not for what we believe, but for what we actually do. This one's not in your outline either, but 1 Timothy 6:17 says, command those who are rich in this world to do good and to be rich in good deeds and be generous and willing to share. I know that there's natural pushback that comes up with this, okay? IB is one of the higher counties for unemployment, and you may not feel rich, and it's very easy to not feel rich because there's always somebody richer than you. There's a guy on my street that has jet skis, right? Awesome. Okay, so I'm never going to feel like I've made it until I'm riding a jet ski and, wearing a cowboy hat. I don't know why I would do that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. We don't feel rich, but we've got to get perspective, okay? Because that verse said, those who are rich in this world, not those who are rich on your street, okay? If you've ever stood in front of your closet and decided, what should I wear today? Maybe even switched, okay? I do that every week for church. I'm like, this one, that one. You're rich, okay? That's just the bottom line of it. If you own a car, you are richer than 93% of the world, okay? Again, that verse talks to the world. If you own 2 cars, you are filthy rich, okay? If you own 2 cars and a recreational vehicle, an RV, some jet skis, and quads, we need a Harley, we need to talk because I want to play with them. But also, you're obscenely rich, okay, in the world sense. And I'm not making anybody feel guilty, okay? It's okay to have nice things. I have nice things. But we are blessed to be a blessing. And again, command those who are rich in this world to do something about those who don't have what they need, okay? So don't hear this in a guilty way, but do hear it in a motivational way that we need to do this, okay? This isn't that Facebook post that's scroll for the devil, click like for Jesus, okay? That's not the goal. So the answer, again, it's not quit our jobs, sell our homes, be homeless ourselves. It's okay to have things, okay? But it is not okay to not share, and we want to do that. And I want to help do this in a big, powerful way together. Paul just says to Timothy that we're called to share. So let's be disturbed by injustice so much so that we do something. And number 3, justice, we got to remember this. Justice without Jesus is just a Band-Aid. So justice without Jesus is just a Band-Aid. Okay, I know Band-Aids really well. Okay, I mentioned I have 5 kids. Prepare yourselves, what I'm about to tell you. I didn't mention this. They're 5 and under, okay? They're all very, very small, okay? So we deal with a lot of Band-Aids in our home, we buy them at Costco, okay? The baby is a girl, also a baby, not walking yet. Not a lot of Band-Aids going on with her, okay? The other 4 are all boys, all boy all the time, oh boy. Okay, there's a lot of boys, and that means, what does that mean? Okay, if you haven't had a boy yet, it's a little bit wilder, okay? It means things like everything is something to be climbed on or picked up and thrown. Car doors get opened while you're driving. It means, we're jumping, climbing, running, sliding. Every stick is a weapon that needs to be sharpened and used on a brother. I mean, it's just like, that's what needs to happen. So we deal with a lot of Band-Aids. Now, recently, one of our sons I don't know, he went through this like clumsy phase, I guess. Like he was just like always getting our attention, coming in from outside crying, coming upstairs from downstairs crying. I'm watching him just run into stuff and crash into things. And it was like, what is going on? This looks like the Walking Dead over here. We've got Band-Aids all over him. And I couldn't figure it out. It just seemed like it came on all of a sudden. I was like, maybe it's a growth thing. And then I watched him trying to go up some stairs, and he was literally like tripping on every stair. And I was like, hey, buddy, come here real quick. And I look, and what had happened was he had grown enough that we had put him in a new pair of shoes. And this new pair of shoes had like a sole that went around the foot, and it was just a little bit of a lip. It created this lip. And so basically, he wasn't like high-stepping it all over the house. He was just eating it. And so he was eating it all over the place. So I comforted him, and I bandaged his wounds, and I did what any loving father would do. I went and got an even bigger package of Band-Aids because we were going to need a lot more. No, I didn't do that. We got him some different shoes, and we solved the problem. As parents, we know not to just fix the short-term problem if there's a way to address the actual root cause. And so without the eternal Savior, if we're bringing justice to the oppressed, but without Jesus, it's just temporary relief. And so we want to do both. I'm not saying we don't do it. I'm saying we need to bring Jesus with us as we do that. John 14:6 says that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father except through him. And so, we have the eternal solution to their greatest spiritual need. And so we want to make sure that we always include that. People can help the poor and defend the marginalized without Jesus. That's called social work, and that's a good thing. But as Jesus followers, we're not called to social work. We're called to kingdom work. So we're called to restore them spiritually. When you look at this blanket, I mean, the biggest rift and rip in this is what was torn by sin between people and God. And that's ultimately the thread that's causing this whole thing to unravel. And when we can bring that with justice, we're able to repair this in a more permanent way. And so that's what we want to be doing. True compassion addresses our needs at every level, especially the eternal. Mark 8:36, Jesus says, what good would it be for us to gain the whole world and still forfeit our souls? So, we don't want to do good and not bring Jesus with us again. So we're going to do that. This legacy series is not a listen and consider type of series. Okay, this isn't like, oh, that was great, okay? We want to figure out, what are we going to do? Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. We're going to, every week, be talking about how can we do these things that God said would please him. And so we want to be agents of justice on the micro level and the macro level, okay? What's the micro level? That's the personal level. So everybody has that one thing or those things that really just get you. Like for us, it's orphans. It's just that every time we think about that, we think, man, we've got to do something about it. And over the 12 years of our marriage or whatever, we've gotten more and more action oriented with that. And now we've got full-time orphanage on IP Boulevard. Okay, so that's fine. But what are you going to do on the micro level personally as a family? You could sponsor a child through Bright Hope or Compassion. You could meet the needs of just a struggling mom. That every time you drop your kid off at school, you see this one who's just struggling, and she needs help. That's something that you could do. You could partner with your growth group to serve at the San Diego Rescue Mission. I know we're just wrapped up our work series, which means most of our groups are wrapping up. All of the group leaders have a menu of items where you can go and serve in the community together as a group. That's something that you could do to bring some of that mishpat, that justice. You could consider foster care or adoption for yourself, or providing respite care for those who do. You could, there's a guy in my growth group, we were talking about this in the work series, this idea that you're going to work as if you're working for Jesus. He has a new job. He's a manager in training at a restaurant. And every day he sees this homeless guy, and he's super not bothering anybody. He doesn't ask people for money. He doesn't he doesn't have a sign. He's not bothering anybody, but he just quietly waits on the patio until people are finished eating, and then he just kind of comes over and checks and see if there's any food left. And he's like, dude, we're talking about working like I'm working for Jesus, and every day it's just on my heart. So I finally, I cleared it with my manager. I said, hey, is it all right if I share I get an employee meal, can I share it with this guy? And so he tells the guy, hey man, they pay me in food to work here as well as a paycheck. Would it be okay if I shared with you? And the guy just wept, he said. And he started doing it every day. And again, he did it with his boss's approval and all of that, but it's that's the micro level. What can I do to help somebody in need? And so that's that. But then there's also the macro level. And this is this idea that what, as a people, as a church, meaning a group of people following Jesus, there are some things that we can do together that are way bigger and faster and more powerful than we could do alone, right? Like if it costs $25,000 to drill a deep water well in a village in Africa where they have no clean drinking water and they're drinking out of these, puddles when there are puddles and it's all diseases and everybody gets sick, but we can drill a well for 25 grand. Like I could start saving, a savings account and, 10 years from now I could buy a well and that'd be amazing. But we could talk about it on one weekend and all give together and build a well today, and then an entire generation of people are affected instantly. And so there's things that we can do on the macro level, and that's really what our Christmas conspiracy is about, okay? Our Christmas conspiracy, it's a year-end offering. None of it stays here. It all goes out to make a difference locally, regionally, and around the world, okay? And here's why we call it the conspiracy, because Christmas is already a time of generosity, isn't it? It's giving. I mean, it's about gift giving. And there's it's a Santa Claus. We have all of that. But here's the thing. It is, but it's sort of an insider thing, isn't it? I mean, we make a list of what we want and we give it to our family and friends. And so we have a wish list. I mean, it is generosity. And I don't want to step on that too hard because he's always watching. He knows if I'm naughty or nice, right? No, that's not why. But here's the thing, we want to, what if there was a conspiracy where we said, what if we looked way beyond our own selves and we decided, hey, there's people without a coat and we've got 2 coats. Let's do something together. Because if we do it together, we can do something on the macro level that's just incredible. And so each week we've been, introducing a new partner because we're partnering with all these organizations. We take how we pick them really seriously. So they're all organizations where all of the money goes to actually doing the thing, not supporting CEOs and jets and stuff like that. And then these are real needs, and these are also organizations that bring Jesus with them, okay? So they bring a cool glass of water in Jesus' name, all right? And so that's what we want to do. Now, we are God's workmanship. We're created for good works. If God lives in us, if we've truly encountered him, our lives are going to begin to look like his. It's going to transform our actions, and this is going to leave a mark. It's going to leave a legacy. Our hope for this church, and really every church in our network, all the way from TJ, all the way up north to Salt Lake City, is that our generous, compassionate acts of mercy would become the reputation of this place. That if we were to cease to exist, people go, man, I miss those guys. That people in our community who maybe don't even believe like us would be like, I don't know about the Jesus stuff, but I sure am glad that they're a part of our community. I would love, our school that we rent from, I hope that we have that reputation with them where they're like, well, I mean, I'm not going to the church with them or anything, but man, I sure think they're great to work with. I hope that we have that kind of reputation. And that's something that we do by doing justice. And so we want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Armando and Leah to come up. They're going to sing a song for you. This is like a sit and reflect song. And this song is called Salt and Light. So I'm going to introduce the verse that this song comes from. I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then they're going to sing. And the chorus of this song comes from this final verse that's on your outline, Matthew 5:13. And it's a call to leave a legacy by the lives that we live, to live lives like Jesus, acting justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God. And if we do that, we're going to start to begin to reweave and repair the fabric all around us, and it's going to start to resemble a lot more of what God designed it to look like. So would you pray with me? Jesus, we want to join you in your mission to restore the world. God, I pray that our faith would be so real that it affects the way that we actually live, that our lives would look more and more like yours every day. I pray that you would put on our hearts in a very real way what you want us to do with the Christmas conspiracy offering, what we can do on the micro level, and I pray that together on the macro level we would do something that absolutely leaves a legacy in this community and on this world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Oh, the beauty of the King. You make righteous those who seek. You have written and redeemed my story. Let my eyes see your kingdom shine all around. Let my heart overflow with passion for your name. Let my life be a song revealing who you are. For you are salt and light. Oh, the love that set me free. You bring hope to those in need. You have written and redeemed my story. Let my eyes see your kingdom shine all around. Let my heart overflow with passion for your name. Let my life be a song revealing who you are. For you are salt and light. You are love's great height. You are deep and wide, a consuming fire. You are salt and light. You are love's great height. You are deep and wide, a consuming fire. Let my light see your kingdom shine all around. Let my heart overflow with passion for your name. Let my life be a song revealing who you are. For you are salt and light. You are salt and light. You are salt and light.